Several celebrities came forward on Assange's behalf today, and his attorney issued this blunt warning.
A number of people were prepared to stand up on behalf of Mr. Assange and prefer his innocence. In those circumstances, I think we will see another bail application, and they were but the tip of an iceberg. This is going to go viral. Many people will come forward to stand as sureties for Mr. Assange. Many people believe Mr. Assange to be innocent, myself included, and many people believe that this prosecution is politically motivated.
Meanwhile, WikiLeaks say it's operating as usual and that it plans to release even more documents on schedule. The company posted a massive encrypted file that Assange's lawyer called a thermonuclear device. He says it will be activated if WikiLeaks is shut down.
Joining us tonight to discuss WikiLeaks and Assange are Naomi Wolfe, who is concerned about the dangers to democracy by manipulating the law and the detainment of Assange. And Clay Shirky is an expert on social networking and admittedly conflicted about how to handle Assange and WikiLeaks in this circumstance. And for the legal perspective, we've asked CNN's Jeff Toobin to join us. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
All right, Jeff, let me ask you this question. Two discrete legal issues to be confronted. First, his potential exposure in Sweden, or I guess in London, for the events in Sweden about sexual assaults that are alleged. Second, the events relating to the leaking and the publication of the diplomatic documents. How do you assess his legal exposure?
Well, I think he is in big trouble in both realms. The Swedish government has now filed formal charges against him and are seeking his extradition. Most of the time, extradition is successful, and it is likely, I think, that he will go back to Sweden sooner or later. Delay, of course, is always possible. In terms of the WikiLeaks case, the case about disclosure of classified information, there have been no charges yet. But when you have the Attorney General of the United States hold a press conference, the sole purpose of which is to say we are investigating this guy and his group for criminal activity, it's a safe bet that charges will be filed soon, and I think they will be.
Well, what's so hard about just charging him with receiving stolen government documents?
Because you have to put the pieces together for a criminal case. Who actually just got these documents? How did they get onto WikiLeaks, onto the website? Who physically put them there? What was Assange's role in getting, was it a thumb drive, from point A to point B? All of that may be known to the U.S. government. It's certainly not known to the public now, and you can't bring a criminal case unless you can actually connect the evidentiary dots.
I can't believe we're having this conversation in a way, because Assange isn't the guy who got the classified information. Some unknown person did that. He's not Daniel Ellsberg. He's the New York Times. And I'm shocked that we're sitting around saying, oh, there's a criminal discussion about a criminal investigation of someone who is a publisher. No different from us sitting here. No different from me putting things on my own Facebook page or website. No different from the New York Times. And what has it come to in the United States? That there's been this mission creep that the people who are actually publishing what was classified information are the ones being scrutinized, when that's something that's decided by the courts. And they decided in the Ellsberg case that the New York Times was right to publish, that the benefit to all of us as citizens outweighed the national security alert that the government then declared. And they always declare a national security alert when they don't want the citizens to know something embarrassing to them.
Clay, you've said you're very confused about, on the one hand, you're for total transparency, but not absolute.
No,
You're for open.
On the contrary, I said I'm not for total transparency. If, for example, there was a leak of all the information from all the teenage girls on Facebook, right, I think we would regard that with horror. So there is, I think, not a case to be made for total transparency. And the way democracies deal with that is we say we have a system of checks and balances. There are some kinds of things that can be published, other kinds of things that can't be published. I think we would have no trouble saying of the New York Times, were they to publish such a hypothetical data file, something private material from Facebook, that this would be problematic.
What if it's in the public interest?
But it may not be in the public interest.
But that's what the courts decide.
This is
not legislators.
And this is what I come down to, which is whatever the long haul decision of a democracy is, if Assange is brought to trial and the trial goes forward, or if, as Senator Lieberman wants to do, the laws are rewritten and the new laws take place, that at least will have been part of the democratic process. The only truly catastrophic mistake I think we could make right now is to opt out of democracy because it's too slow and just run WikiLeaks off the net because we don't like it. Both because in the short term it doesn't live up to democratic ideals, and because in the long term, actually in the medium term, we hand the rhetorical advantage to every autocratic government in the world.
Can I ask a question? Because I want to parse this just a little bit more finely. Don't we have to, when you began to do this, distinguish between the person who took or stole the information and somebody who merely publishes it?
Absolutely.
And so let's look at those in two entirely different circumstances, Jeff, as well as a matter of law.
It's not our opinion. It's not what we're sitting around thinking this is right or this is wrong, or I don't want my daughter's secrets from Facebook published by the New York Times. It's a matter of law. There is such thing as classified information. It is illegal to release it if it's classified, if you're the one who took it. So the person, their right to investigate is whoever took it. I mean, that's what happened. And if, by the way, if they're investigating him, where is Cheney and where is, Scooter Libby, who also released classified information in outing Valerie Plame?
Dick Cheney was the Vice President of the United States who has authority to declassify anything he wants. But putting that aside, since when is Julian Assange in charge of deciding what should be public and what's in the public interest? We have a process.
And that's why there was a court case, and Daniel Ellsberg was facing 120 years, and that judge said this is in the interest of the American people to know that we are engaged in a secret war, and that's what this leak also shows. We're engaged in secretly bombing Yemen, secretly bombing Pakistan, and
Jeff,
that is in the national interest for us to know.
You would agree there's a distinction between this person who took it and stole it off the government computer, and if it came in the mail as just a thumb drive, as you said, if Assange just put it on a website, that would be a very different set of issues.
That would be a different set of issues.
So we need to answer that factual question.
You have to also decide. There's also an issue of intent. If you intend to simply blow out 250,000 documents that are putting individuals at risk, United States government employees at risk, people who cooperate with the United States government at risk, that is not up to Julian Assange. That is up to the United States government.
Scooter Libby did that.
But Assange went with the Guardian, went with Der Spiegel, in this case the Times by proxy, and they redacted some of the documents and held some of the documents
back.
They redacted some of it.
Jeffrey, he asked the Pentagon to work with him on redacting what was sensitive, and they would not do so.
Well,
so who's responsible for this?
Who's in charge? I mean, Julian Assange is not in charge.
And let's also notice something else.
Actually, Julian Assange is not how democracy works, in my opinion.
To ask the Pentagon to redact the sensitive information so that he can release what the rest of us deserve to know, and the Pentagon
The Congressional Research Service produced a document in October looking back at the August release of the Afghani documents, and they said basically what this conversation has come down to, which is, A, there may be some, in fact, there is some rationale for charging Assange under the Espionage Act, and B, it's never been tried up against strong First Amendment principles since New York Times Co. versus the United States, which is the Pentagon Papers case. So
which decided what?
Which decided that the New York Times could publish the documents, that it's illegal to leak
for the publication.
Right. It's illegal to leak secrets, but it's not illegal to publish leaks.
Exactly right. Look, we also have to notice something else, which is the chilling effect. If you can close down PayPal, intimidate Amazon, if you can drive someone off the internet, then tomorrow it's going to be us, and tomorrow it's going to be you people watching, because
slippery slope arguments are almost always bogus.
Exactly how you close down an open society.
WikiLeaks is not the only evidence of an open society. The internet is alive and well. It'll be alive and well if
WikiLeaks anymore.
Sorry?
I can't access WikiLeaks
anymore.
Good.
Because WikiLeaks, absolutely, because WikiLeaks is jeopardizing many lives by doing what it's doing.
You don't know. Can you point to a place in WikiLeaks where someone's life is jeopardized?
I spoke to an ambassador this morning who said horror stories are going to emerge. And I'm not going to tell you which one I spoke to because he needs to be protected. And he says you have to read these things as people in other countries do. They're not democracies. They're not the American people. They are other regimes.
I keep saying this because sometimes when democracies enter attack, you have to restate the obvious. The courts decide that.
Okay, hold it right there. We've got to take a quick break, but we're going to come right back with more of this fascinating conversation. Stay with us. We're back with more discussion on WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. Naomi Wolfe, Clay Shirky, and Jeff Toobin are here. I want to raise the privacy concern in a minute, but first, Elliot, you go.
Yeah, I want to come back, Clay. You were asking about Bob Woodward. We're raising the issue of his book, where he relied upon conversations, documents that came out of the Situation Room in the White House. In what way is that different, Clay? How would you analyze that? Is that the same thing?
So here's the thing. I know Julian slightly, not well enough to characterize his motivations, but I can say that he is one of the fastest learners I know. And one of the things he seems to have done is changed his selectivity bias. As we were talking about before the break, what he said now was, when I did document dumps, it actually wasn't, it wasn't the right thing to do. It wasn't the right way to run the service. And so now his selectivity is the Guardian selectivity, the New York Times selectivity. He's not just dumping 250,000 cables. He's relying on the existing publishing establishment. So I don't see how he is not himself a publisher. You said something interesting, Elliot, right at the beginning. You said, the man behind the leaked documents. From my point of view, he's the man in the middle of the leaked documents. PFC Bradley Manning has been accused of being the man behind the leaked documents. And when you look at everything from, CIA General Counsel's testimony on this in, 30 years ago to the, the report last August from Congressional Research Service, it all says the obvious crime is removing classified information from a classified system. It is not at all clear that you can prosecute publishers for publishing leaked documents.
So come back to Woodward. Where does Woodward fit into this?
So I think, like Jeffrey, I think that Woodward is not a criminal for publishing leaked documents, but I also think that Assange is not a criminal for publishing leaked documents. However, I also think that if I'm wrong about that, that the way in which I would be wrong is going through the court system, not through an extra-legal running of WikiLeaks off the network. The damage to me, Jeffrey, to your earlier point about the slippery slope, the non-slippery slope argument is the State Department has currently committed itself to making it very difficult for autocratic governments to force information off the internet. And we're suddenly providing not just a recipe, but a rationale that's making everyone from Lukashenko to Kim Jong-il laugh.
Oh, but I see, again, this is a slippery slope argument.
No,
that
this is not a slippery slope argument.
It is, because the fact that someone takes United States government documents, secret, no foreign distribution, and says that shouldn't be on the internet, to say that North Korea shouldn't have a free press, to say that Russia shouldn't allow journalists to fly. I mean, I think it is easy to draw a distinction between the two.
Can I talk about the Espionage Act? Because that's really what's at stake now that they've invoked it. I predicted in my book, The End of America, that sooner or later journalists would be targeted with the Espionage Act in an effort to close down free speech and free criticism of government. And we have a precedent for that. In 1917, the Espionage Act was invoked to go after people like us who were criticizing the First World War. Publishers, educators, editors. And people were put in prison. They were beaten. One guy got a 10-year sentence for reading the First Amendment. And that intimidation effectively closed down dissent for a decade in the United States of America. The Espionage Act has a very dark and dirty history. And when you start to use the Espionage Act to criminalize what I'm sure you've handled classified documents in your time as a serious journalist, you know perfectly well that every serious journalist has seen or heard about classified information and repeated it. When you start to use the Espionage Act to say reporting is treachery, reporting is spying, it's espionage, you criminalize journalism. And that's the history that our country has shown.
Yeah, I recognize there is that history, and I'm familiar with the Red Scare, too. America is different now.
Oh, it's worse in some ways.
Well, we just disagree.
Jeff, I want to ask Jeff a question, though, because I want to come back to this Woodward distinction. You would agree with Clay and Naomi, I think, that Julian Assange would be precisely Bob Woodward if he had been the recipient of these documents. Is that correct?
Well, I'd have to know a lot more.
But it might be the case.
It well might be the case.
Okay, so
yes.
You're sort of clear articulation at the beginning that he clearly violated something. Well, maybe not so much.
I'm not sure. Certainly, the Attorney General of the United States seems to think criminal activity was involved here. But I think the wholesale taking of enormous quantities of classified information and putting it on the internet, even if you don't put all 250,000 documents on it, I think that is a meaningful distinction from what Bob Woodward does.
Well, it seems to me that Bob Woodward arguably did something much more egregious. He took real-time decisions about why we were going to war in Afghanistan, the discussions of rationale, where we would go, spoke to the most senior political and military officials in the nation and blasted that out in a book.
Well, including, I mean, again, there is a distinction in part because the President of the United States and the Vice President are allowed to declassify anything they want at any time for any reason. So if the president declassifies
a lot of people who didn't have that power were sourced in that book, seem to be speaking in clear violation of law.
I frankly have
they,
always,
in fact, should be subject to criminal investigation.
I have always wondered why.
Why aren't they being investigated?
Why Woodward gets away with it? I mean, it is an interesting question.
It's a fascinating conversation. I've mostly listened as a non-lawyer to these arguments, and I never want to make a case against due process because that seems always the right thing to do. And yet I also want to say the government should be able to shut down people who are giving away secrets that are going to cause people to lose their lives and put in and cause our own people abroad not to be able to do their work in safety. All right, then. Naomi Wolfe, Clay Shirky, and Jeffrey Toobin. Fabulous conversation.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
And
Thanks
you too, Elliot Spitzer. We'll be right back.